Hello,
He's Oliver,
she's Lucy,
and you're listening to Anyway Movies,
the podcast of film fanatics and movie maniacs.
the podcast of discussions, debates, and occasional distractions as we talk about all things cinema.
If you like what you hear, be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on podcasting platforms.
Big shout out to my sister Molly for creating the logo and images for our podcast. Give her a follow on Instagram at _Molly_Joanne_.
Now that's all out of the way, dim the lights, turn the projector on, and let's start the episode.
Hello everybody and welcome to Marvel March.
Ooh, I'm so excited.
Same. So we are in a new month. It is now the third month of 2021. So me and Oliver thought it was a good idea to theme a certain month. And we came across Marvel because I have never watched them up until this moment.
I know, literally. This girl works in a cinema and has seen, like, the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, and then, was it Infinity War or Endgame?
So I watched Guardians of the Galaxy and then I watched Infinity War the day before it came out because I work at a cinema, so that was one of the benefits. So I knew how big of a film it was going to be, so I thought if something big happens, I want to be the first to know. So I watched Infinity War with no context whatsoever. I had no clue what was going on, but I enjoyed it a little bit. Guardians, I'll get to that.
Today we are focusing purely on Phase 1. That is from the first Iron Man movie to the first Avengers.
And I had not seen any of these before doing this episode because I have Disney Plus. So I watched them all on Disney Plus because convenience.
I mean, let's get straight into it. What was your overall first impression after watching the first phase of the MCU?
Okay, so I think that they're not terrible movies. I mean, they definitely were better than I was expecting. I was expecting them to be really bad for some reason because superhero films are not really my kind of thing. I mean, I grew up with the Christopher Reeve Superman movies and I absolutely loved them as a kid. So getting into these Marvel films at the age of 22, I was just like, not sure if they're going to appeal. But they did. I quite enjoyed them. They're not amazing. I'm still not wowed. I still don't understand the massive hype surrounding them. But I'm hoping that changes as they continue on. I mean, obviously I have negative opinions on some of them, but overall I wasn't disappointed. I was sort of, yeah, they're good.
I mean, Phase 1 is probably like the weakest phase.
Yeah, I've heard that.
I mean, it was all about starting something off, finding your footing. They had like a general idea of what they wanted to do for each movie, but obviously as time's gone on, they've sort of changed directions, changed characters slightly. I can understand what you mean, and I don't think it's so out of left field to say that the first phase of movies aren't the best.
Yeah, I mean, I did enjoy watching kind of their origin stories play out. I mean, I think they're great introductory films because they're not too overly complicated, which I was expecting. I was expecting them to be really in-depth and annoyingly deep. Even though what I wanted to get out of these movies was just fun. And for the most part, I got that. So what's kind of your take? Because obviously you watch these films. Wait, did you watch these films as they came out? Or are you kind of a late bloomer?
A little bit of both, because I'd watched Iron Man, not when it had come out, but when, like, a year after it came out, when it was like on TV and stuff. And I'd seen The Incredible Hulk. I actually had the DVD of The Incredible Hulk, and I used to watch that movie quite a lot when I was younger. I remember, I don't really know what it was about it because rewatching it for this, I didn't have the same feel like I did for other movies I watched when I was younger that I watch now. I don't think it's a bad movie, but it didn't hold up in the same way.
Mm.
Thor was the first MCU film I watched at the cinema, and bit controversial, is personally my favourite film from Phase One, and Thor is my favourite out of the big three: Captain America, Tony Stark. Thor is my favourite, and also it introduced Loki, arguably one of the best MCU characters ever. Not a bad movie by any means, in my opinion. Also, the best character, Darcy.
Darcy Lewis
Da-
is an icon.
she is one of my favorite MCU characters of all time. I absolutely love her. She is hilarious. How proud she was when she was like, "Oh yeah, I tased Thor. Yes, I did." That's the level of like confidence and reassurance in yourself that I aspire to be. The first Captain America film, honestly, is probably my least favorite.
Really?
Yeah, okay, so I've watched the movie about 4 times. The first time I fell asleep watching it.
They were like, that's not a good sign.
The second time I couldn't get through even half of it because I was just bored. The third time I watched it, I got through it and I made it to the end, and I didn't think it was a bad film after I'd properly watched it. But again, it wasn't my favorite. And then I rewatched it again for this, and my opinion still stands.
Wow, okay. That's yeah. I don't believe that.
Why? What do you think of the first Captain America film?
I thought it was one of the better ones. I think it has one of the best endings when he wakes up in the modern world and realizes that all of his friends are dead, pretty much.
Yeah, I do have to admit that ending is pretty good, and it's an excellent lead into the Avengers. I do agree with that.
Oh, definitely, definitely. There are so many strong characters, which I quite enjoyed. I read a comment somewhere that said it's not about the stories in Phase One, it's about the characters and how they make it entertaining, even though the stories are a little bit shallow in places. And I completely agree with that. I think on the most part, the characters are pretty strong.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think Loki's my favourite because Tom Hiddleston, you can't go wrong with him, really, can you? Like,
well, apparently he portrayed his, or he based his portrayal of Loki. I don't know if it was just in the first Thor film and then built on it in the Avengers, or if it's something he's been building on the whole MCU, which I guess makes sense more so. But he based the character off of Iago from Othello and Edmund, I think it is, from King Lear.
I thought you were going to say Edmund from Narnia, and I was going to say, I can see that. Loki would totally give up his family for Turkish delight.
So, what would you say is your favorite movie? If mine's Thor, what's your favorite Phase One movie?
Well, actually, this is where we are in agreement because Thor is actually my favorite movie from Phase One as well, which is hugely unpopular.
Yeah,
But I can't lie, I had a great time with it.
I agree with the idea that the Thor films aren't the strongest in the MCU. And again, it might be just a big part of it might just be the nostalgia aspect of it being the first MCU film I watched in the cinema. But I've rewatched Thor the most out of all of the Phase One films. And I find the character, even though he's very over the top and excitable and can be overly emotional, I find it both entertaining but also easy to connect to and understand, if that makes sense. Because he's very much a larger than life character and over the top, but in the best way, in the right way, not like his acting was over the top and too much, as in the character can be. One thing I do have to say about the MCU is I think a lot of the characters, even though they are larger than life characters, have been grounded very well in some kind of realism that makes them easy to connect with or to sympathize with or to understand in a certain way. And my first instinct when I think of that is Thor, because that was the first character that did that for me. And also, again, Darcy Lewis, best character.
I also quite enjoyed how sort of Shakespearean the dialogue was on Asgard. And I think it really helped by the fact that Kenneth Branagh directed it, because obviously he's a very famous Shakespearean actor. I quite liked it, even though I'm not a huge fan of the big gusto speeches and old English. But I think it really, really helped finalise the sort of aura it was going for. Because I think that Asgard is the best place that they've done so far. Like, they've shown us. Like, that introductory scope of it in the beginning of the first Thor film after they've ended that prologue bit. I was like, okay, yes. I'm here now. Because it's just a really nice place to look at.
It is. It's really pretty.
And the costumes as well. Impeccable.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Like, I want to wear all of those costumes. I don't care if I'm a girl.
They are absolutely stunning. The costume design in general for the MCU is brilliant, but like Thor really outdid themselves. Okay, so if Thor is your favourite, what's your least favourite MCU Phase 1 film?
Iron Man 2. Iron Man 2. I hated Iron Man 2. I really didn't like it. Because the thing that I loved about the first Iron Man was how self-aware it was. I liked how not that seriously it took itself. But Iron Man 2 completely destroyed that and made it much darker than it needed to get, to be honest. It was just very forgettable. I really don't remember a lot from it. I just remember that it took itself too seriously and I found myself just switching off every 15 minutes or so.
If I remember correctly, the idea originally was that the second movie was going to focus more on, because obviously, like Tony's a bit of a playboy in it, and he gets drunk and all that kind of stuff. And it was supposed to originally deal with his alcoholism that he struggles with in the comics, and it was supposed to be a lot darker. But then they kept it a bit more lighthearted. Like, it could have worked, but I agree that, well, I think at least that those two ideas didn't mesh as well together as they thought it would have. But I do have to give props because it did introduce Black Widow.
That is true. I love Black Widow.
Scarlett Johansson is just impeccable as Black Widow.
I still don't understand though, why is she called Black Widow? Is there some sort of deep dive into why she's called Black Widow, or is it just a thing like, yeah, she's called Black Widow, nobody knows why, she just thought it sounded cool?
I mean, I'm not a super comic book expert, but I think in the comics, I believe that was her alias when she was a Russian spy. And the whole
that makes sense.
The whole thing is like a Black Widow, she would seduce men and then she would take them out.
Her scene where she's in the boxing ring and completely takes down Happy.
I love Pepper's reaction. Oh my God! Happy!
Love it. Can we please talk about the Stanley cameos? Because these are by far the best moments of these films. I'm not going to lie to you.
I mean, we can't talk about a Marvel film and not talk about the Stanley cameos.
My favourite one is from Thor, when they're all trying to pull the hammer out from the rock, and then Stan drives on the truck and tries to like and wraps the rope around it and tries to drive it to pull it out, and he goes, did it work? Oh, it was just so cute. I was like, come on. If there's anyone who's going to lift that hammer from the rock, it's Stanley.
Oh, can you imagine? Stan Lee with the power of Thor. There would be no need for the Avengers.
I mean, wouldn't it be funny if like the end credit sequence was Stan Lee holding up the hammer and being the new king
That
of
would have been
Asgard?
brilliant.
Also, that's another point I wanted to make. And this is the biggest mystery that will always invade every time I watch these films. How the hell did they get Anthony Hopkins to do Thor? What made him say yes? Oscar-winning actor, probably one of the best actors ever on the planet living today, in a superhero film in which he has maybe 3 scenes.
I mean, they were great scenes.
They were great scenes. I thought he did really well. But I just remember him coming up on screen though, and I'm thinking, what the hell is he doing here? Because he doesn't seem like the person who would say yes to a Marvel film.
Maybe he's a big fan of the comics and we just don't know.
I mean,
I was going to say maybe he just needed a paycheck, but...
Yeah, he needed a new conservatory.
His car broke down.
Yeah, he had a flat tire.
The only way to pay for a new one is to do Thor.
Oh,
do you know one thing that blows my mind? Is like how many ex-Doctor Who actors are in the MCU.
I know. When Jenna Coleman popped up in the first Avenger, I was like, excuse me?
The best part of the first Captain America film is when Jenna Coleman shows up. Sorry, not sorry.
No, you're wrong. You're so wrong about that, Oliver. The best part of Captain America, the first Avenger, is the Star-Spangled Man with a Plan musical number. I don't even care. That is my favourite part of any Marvel film so far. It was so out of left field and really took me by surprise. And honestly, I've not been able to get that song out of my head since I watched it. Fair play, Marvel. Fair play.
This is going to sound a bit weird, especially because we're both musical theatre nerds, but I basically try and block that scene from my mind.
It's wild. Honestly, it's absolutely wild. I wasn't expecting it at all. And then it just starts.
I get the idea and the whole point of the propaganda thing. Like, it makes sense, but it just didn't fit right for me.
Fair enough. I loved it. I thought it was so good. I was like, yay, I'm finally having fun watching this now. Can this entire film just be a musical movie, please?
A whole MCU musical film. Now, that would be something I'd be interested in seeing how they pulled off.
Oh, dear. Well, I've watched enough American TV to know that musical episodes never work.
But they're so entertaining. The Grey's Anatomy musical episode.
There was a Grey's Anatomy musical episode?
I think they sang Coldplay.
Oh, wow.
Or the Buffy musical episode.
Oh, God, I've heard a lot about that. Oh, God.
I guess that moves us straight onto the first Avengers movie. So, yeah, what did you think of the first movie?
I loved it. I liked how Hulk completely battered Loki.
Yeah.
When he flung him around. I just found that super funny.
I am a god, you puny.
Also, I didn't realise how many memes were in that film. I understood that reference. No, it was so much fun. I really enjoyed it. I
I think.
hated Phil Coulson dying though. That was really sad.
Oh, he's fine.
Is he?
Yeah, he comes back to life in the Agents of Shield TV series. He's the main character.
How did I not know that that was a thing?
Well, it finished now, but the whole Agents of Shield. The original idea was it was supposed to be. It started. It started just after, or like a few months after the first Avengers film, and the whole idea was to see what it would be like from ordinary people's perspective of the world in the Marvel universe, and it would be following the Agents of Shield on missions and stuff. And the main plot point for the first series and following on to the second series was that Phil Coulson died in the Avengers, but he was told that he was only out for about, I think it was 8 to 10 seconds, when in actuality, he was stabbed through the heart and he did actually die. And spoilers, but they basically used alien blood and enhanced technology to bring him back to life.
Ah, so they're doing the Harry Hart Kingsman the Golden Circle method.
I mean, it's similar.
No, but yeah, I thought his death was really sad. But now that makes me feel really happy knowing that he's alive and well.
I mean,
Hopefully,
he
if
does.
he didn't die at the end of Agents
Well,
of Shield, but
well. I mean, he did die, but then he was brought back again as a robot. It's
Jesus, he's worse than Loki.
well, yeah, because Loki never actually died. He just pretended to die.
He's just the best at faking death, I think, at this point.
Yeah, I for the first Avengers movie, I think it was a great. I feel like they led up to it very well, and it was a great, like, well-rounded movie to finish off the first phase and properly launch the MCU into the phases as we now know them.
Yeah, definitely. I also loved the introduction of Mark Ruffalo as Bruce Banner because I think he's a really underrated character in my opinion.
Oh yeah.
I liked how he was always flinching, as if he was always worried that something was going to trigger him. He always kind of has his hands together and is always kind of fidgeting around, and doesn't really like contact with other people. Like if someone gets too close to him, if you see him, he sort of tries to move away, and I quite like how that was a choice. I mean, I don't know if that was Mark's decision or whether it was the director, but I thought that was a really nice touch.
Mark Ruffalo is an incredible Bruce Banner.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I remember when I first watched the Avengers, I didn't realize he was the Hulk until he turned into the Hulk. Just because, one, again, I'd seen The Incredible Hulk, and even though at the time I didn't realize it was technically part of the MCU, that was the only live action Hulk I knew. And also, I'm so used to seeing superheroes being like Chris Evans. Not to say that Mark Ruffalo wasn't young and an attractive man or anything, but like Chris Evans is very much like the look of, or Chris Hemsworth. They're both very much the look of the ideal superhero, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, completely get it. Yeah.
So I both didn't realize it, and then when I did, I was like mega impressed. In my opinion, he was the best part of the first Avengers.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that. He was really, really good. And I think that he slipped in nicely with the cast being, a newcomer sort of thing.
Yeah.
Kind of like Jeremy Renner as Hawkeye. I think he fit really well in as well, despite him not really having a lot to do in the previous film.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a really well done film, I think. And to think that at the time that was the biggest crossover to ever happen in cinematic history, and just to see how far they've come since then. I mean, Avengers Endgame was, I mean, I've never seen it, but there was way more characters than in the first Avengers movie, and it's just really cool how they've kind of evolved from that first collaboration.
Yeah. And also the my personal favorite mid-credit scene where they're eating shawarma.
Oh yeah. Oh, I really love that.
But just like the deadpan silence, and it was just them just eating.
They deserve it though. They saved the world.
They did. They did save the world. And then obviously the end credit scene, the first time we properly see Thanos, who became the big bag. Did I say big bag?
You did say big bag,
The
and I wasn't going to correct you because I found it quite funny.
the big bad of the first three phases of the MCU, what is now called the Infinity Saga. I have a lot to say about Thanos, but I'm waiting until we get to phase three to talk about it. But I do think this was a very strong first impression because all it was you see his back, he turns to the side, and then he has this very sinister grin and he doesn't say a word. Like, did the first Avengers come out in 2011, 2012?
2012, the first Avengers.
Yeah, so I was 12 years old, and just cut a long story short, it honestly terrified me.
Really?
Yeah, at 12 years old, just this big purple face turning and then this really creepy grin. I was like, that's not nice. Like, it very much left an impact on young Oliver. But will that impact pay out is yet to be shown.
It's really cool how they sort of wind it up. And I think it's a good closer for phase one.
Yeah.
After a whirlwind of origin stories and finding out who these characters are, and for them to come together at the end to battle evil, and also an evil that we also know the origin story of as well.
Yeah.
I think was quite interesting.
I think it was a smart decision because more or less every character in the Avengers was a character we had already seen, bar a couple. So it didn't necessarily feel like a reintroduction, and there wasn't any ideas that needed to be added in to make sense. It was these characters we knew, a villain that we knew, and then this overlooming presence of things that we didn't know, but at the time we didn't know them. And it was meshed together very well.
So, are there any characters that you maybe weren't that fond of?
Honestly, this is going to get me probably a lot of hate, but I personally, I'm not the biggest fan of Tony Stark.
Blasphemy.
Like, Robert Downey Jr. is an incredible actor, and I think he was the perfect casting. And I don't think anything was necessarily bad about him playing the character by any means. And I quite like the first Iron Man. I can sort of take or leave the second Iron Man, and I also do, and I don't mind him in the Avengers. It's just as a character, if that character was a real person, I wouldn't like him.
Yeah. No, I mean, what I love about Tony Stark is the fact that he is so different, in my opinion, to other superheroes. Like, he is confident and he tells everybody his secret identity after the first film, which has never been done really in any films, especially with my experience of just watching the Superman films. And I just think that sort of personality really works for his character. I think if every single superhero in the Marvel Cinematic Universe was like him, though, it wouldn't be as entertaining. But I think because he sort of stands out and he was the first one, he was the superhero who starts it all, I think it only made sense to make him have the most progressive personality. And he does change.
Yes.
He does have some character development, and I don't think that he's quite through yet. After phase 1, I think that will continue through to phase 2, because I do know what happens at the end of Endgame, because I work at a cinema. I wasn't going to avoid spoilers. Like, I know what happens, but I am sort of hoping that that sort of gears him up for a nice character development throughout phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. And I think we've got there with him in this phase, and I quite enjoyed him. I quite enjoyed his presence, because it really lifted the movie up.
Yeah.
I mean, Iron Man wouldn't be the film it was without Robert Downey Jr.
Actually, the whole thing about him revealing his identity, it was kind of like, I think it was basically like a gamble thing, because they were going to do it with him, and then it paid off so well and people took to it so well, which is why in the MCU there aren't that many superheroes with secret identities, because of how well it paid off for Iron Man. And in the stories that they've been telling, secret identities aren't really needed.
Yeah.
And it's more or less because of how well everyone took Tony Stark coming straight out and saying, I am Iron Man.
No, I think it is interesting how none of the Avengers really have a secret identity. Everybody knows who they are.
Yeah.
And I think that really works, definitely.
This is one of the things I kind of both like and dislike, because I like how different it is, and I again agree that it works, especially with the stories that they've been telling, like I just said. But I do kind of wish there were a couple more heroes that did have a secret identity, because the majority don't really need one. And I just kind of wish there were some that did. But that's like a very nitpicky personal preference thing, because it doesn't really add or take away anything from what we've got, and I'm happy with what we got. So, what about you? Is there any characters you personally weren't the biggest fan of?
Okay, so as much as I enjoyed these films, what I didn't like were the villains. I thought that every single villain in phase 1, except for Loki, was the most generic, one-dimensional, boring villain I have ever seen. And I kind of didn't care. It got to the point where whenever they were fighting, I just switched off, because I wasn't invested. I wasn't invested in the bad guys' story, if they had one. I wasn't invested in their, personality. And this is not an insult to the actors, because obviously they're given a script and they have to work with it. But especially Ivan Vanko from Iron Man 2, I just think was so boring. I mean, come on, guys, you can do better than that. It was just a bit. Yeah, it got to the point where I wished that the films didn't have a villain. I just wanted them to see them kicking ass for the sake of kicking ass, because I just wasn't invested in any of the villains except for Loki, because Tom Hiddleston's great.
I do have to agree that MCU villains can either be really, really good, i.e. Loki, or one note forgettable kind of things. I do think that it gets better as the movies continue.
Oh, I hope you do, because
there are some like one-off villains that are genuinely really good, and
good.
there are some ones that, from what you've been saying, kind of stay there. But again, it's all about personal preference, because I might be thinking of a villain that you end up really liking.
That's one thing that I've noticed. And I guess that's the same with every single series, but everybody has such different opinions. And the Avengers is kind of scary, because if somebody says, for example, I like the first Thor film, you suddenly get everybody hounding you and listing reasons why Thor is a horrible film. it's not a very welcoming fan base, really. I mean, from what I've read, I mean, I'm sure most of the people are great, and there are a lot of Marvel fans that I am friends with, and they all love the movies and they don't really care what opinions are. But some people are so obsessed with Marvel and comics and how true they are to the stories and stuff that if one person disagrees with anything that they say, it's suddenly a huge meltdown. And I'm reading all of this like, why do you care so much? They're just films.
Yeah. I mean, it can get intense.
Yeah. I mean, this is why I was dead scared saying that Thor is my favourite of Phase 1, because that is such an unpopular opinion. No one seems to have that same thought. I mean, most people, from what I have read, say that Iron Man's the best one, in which case that would be the worst case scenario for me, because I would hate to watch all of the films in Phase 1 and say the best one was the first one I watched. Because there's nowhere to go from that point. So I'm kind of glad that the films sort of got better as they went along. Not to say that they're all flawless, they're really not. But from all of them, I definitely think that Thor would be one that I would want to watch again if I ever got a chance to.
Yeah. Well, like I said, Phase 1 is good. Stepping on point. It's very much an introduction. So doing that alone, it does it fairly well. It got enough attention and excitement that they were able to really build on it and push forward. It's been over 10 years since the MCU started, because Iron Man came out in 2008, I think.
Yeah.
And it's still going very strong. And like we've got Black Widow coming out very soon, and they've announced all these movies for Phase 4. We've got the Disney Plus TV series, like WandaVision's currently on right now, and that's doing very well. And Falcon and the Winter Soldier is coming out soon, and Loki after that. So yeah, we've got a lot of exciting things coming up as well. So I have to say, it's very impressive.
I think that closes off this first episode of Marvel March.
Phase 1, done.
I hope we haven't offended too many viewers. Like, I can imagine them saying, "Why would you think that? Oh my god, these opinions are so wrong."
If they don't hate us for Thor, they're going to hate me for Tony Stark.
I know, you're going to have a massive crowd at your house just with pitchforks, torches.
Hey, opinion's an opinion. And if someone has a different opinion, I think that's brilliant.
So please join us for next week, because we will be discussing Marvel Phase 2, which obviously has way more films than Phase 1. So it's probably going to be a longer episode, but you know what? I'm looking forward to it.
I'm excited because arguably my favourite movie from the MCU is in Phase 2. So I'm so ready to talk about it.
I cannot wait. If this is your first episode that you're listening to us, we are the Anyway Movies podcast, and we do have a Facebook page. So like it if you want to get updates on our episodes and when they're uploaded. We are on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Breaker, Radio Public, Anchor, and we also have a YouTube channel where we upload every single episode of the podcast and put subtitles with it. So you can actually tell what we're saying if the audio lags a bit.
Because we're professional like that.
Very professional. We're not doing this on a whim at all. We're not winging it at all. We are very thoroughly professional. I am not in my pajamas right now.
I'm not drinking a cup of tea as we record. Please leave us a review on iTunes and let us know your thoughts and feelings on Marvel Phase 1. What's your favourite movie, your least favourite, your favourite characters, your opinions? This is a very welcoming space, and we're all here to have open discussions. that is always interesting and fun. And with that being said, see you next week.
See you next week. My favourite character in the entire series so far is Sam Wilson / Falcon.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, he's not in phase 1.
Yeah, he is.
No, he's not. He's in phase 2.
No, he's not.
He's first introduced in the Winter Soldier.
Is he?
Yeah.
You are kidding me. That means I've ruined my entire episode plan then. Oh my god.
Wait.
Are you actually kidding me?
No.
I swear he was in the first one, but you see, this is the problem. This is the problem with these films. They're too damn similar.
No, like, his sidekick.
I don't even know if I'm going to keep that in or not. That is so embarrassing.
So, no, keep it in, please.
Oh my god. Oh no. Right. Then I guess my favourite character is Loki then.
We'll talk more about Falcon next week.
Yeah, let's do that. I can't believe I've bloody done that. Like, I researched to hell last night about all of this, and I didn't once look up, oh, was Sam Wilson actually in the first Avenger? No, he was not, Lucy. You were just dumb. I'm kind of like Tom Holland, aren't I? I'm already spoiling the next episode before it's out.
Good to know that that's established. You're the Tom Holland in this situation.